What's going on, world? It's your boy Alex Miner. Welcome to the 1000 Miles podcast. They say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So on this podcast, we talk about the steps that entrepreneurs, creatives, small business owners go through. So hopefully you can learn a lesson from their journey and have less difficulty on yours. And on today's podcast, we have the one, the only Justin Nguyen. Am I pronouncing that right?
Win.
Win?
It's a win, yeah, just like W-I-N.
Dang it. Okay. Some names, I'm not going to get them right. Please forgive me. But go ahead and tell the people what you are all about, what your business is, what your background is, and then we'll dive right in.
Thank you so much for having me on. Basically, so I'm the CEO of GetChoGrindUp, and at GetChoGrindUp, our mission really is to help students find that and bridge that gap into the real world. And the way that we like to describe that is we provide the cheat codes to college, essentially, right? So I have GetChoGrindUp, and that's what we're building right now in terms of our brand. But to pay the bills and as an income of what I've been doing over the past year or so, I've started to do LinkedIn consulting. As my personal brand has grown on LinkedIn, I now help out either individuals or companies build their brand, turn their profiles from just a resume into more of a landing page so that they can generate business from LinkedIn.
Very nice, very nice. And you're talking about all sorts of things that I'm just in love with right now. So the branding, LinkedIn as a platform, helping people level up. Those are all things that we totally believe in at the 1000 Miles podcast. So it seems totally appropriate that you are here. And speaking of podcasts in general, you have a podcast, right?
Yeah, we do. We used to run the GetChoGrindUp podcast, but that's in a sort of a rebranding phase right now. But right now, our main focus for the podcasting world is a podcast called the Declassified College Podcast. Okay. So that is just very short, 5 to 10 minute episodes. Each one is geared towards a specific question that we all had during our college years. And then occasionally we'll bring on like an industry expert to talk about, like, for instance, some people that we've had on talk about international students, how to win scholarships, mainly things that me personally, I don't really have experience around. I usually bring on people who have that experience to tell their story and how students who might fall under that category can learn a little bit from them.
Awesome. That sounds super valuable. But let's take a step back in time real quick and tell me about the origin of GetChoGrindUp. Like, what was the inspiration and how did that lead you into the LinkedIn consulting and all that? Like, take us on the path.
Yeah, of course. So I guess I'll first start off with GetChoGrindUp because that sort of came first. I was paying attention to this guy, you might know him, Gary Vaynerchuk, right? Mm-hmm. So just paying attention to his stuff, and he kept telling everyone, you need to start producing content. I was like, okay, well, what the heck am I going to produce? I'm a student. I don't know what I'm going to do. But my friends used to always joke around with me because I'm Asian, and the Asian stereotype is you're just naturally good at school. And I'm like, that's not a bad stereotype, right? But right, it's like getting good grades and everything. But let me show to like my friends all of the time and effort that I'm putting towards studying, as well as all of these networking things that I'm doing to get these internships at these Fortune 100 companies.
Documenting the process, right?
Exactly. So I thought that that's what I could document, is sort of my journey. And again, it started off as a joke just to prove to my friends that I was actually putting in this time and effort, and it started to gain momentum. So one of my best friends from back home, Gary, and my girlfriend, Michelle, were like, let's turn this into something serious. So that's when the podcast kind of got started. We started bringing on a whole bunch of young individuals who were really successful to learn about their story of how they became successful at such a young age. And then that's sort of been, again, rebranded into what we're trying to change the GetChoGrindUp podcast into a more traditional path focus. So instead of bringing on non-traditional success, we're bringing on more traditional students who are doing really good in school, like how they're doing good in school, etc. So That's sort of the origin story of how GetChoGrindUp got started.
Okay, and how did doing all of this, well, first let me ask, how long did it kind of take for the content that you were producing to gain momentum, and what platforms were you putting that on?
Yeah, so it started to gain momentum, I would say like a few months, like 3 or 4 months into it. And I started getting people messaging me back on my Snapchat story and my Instagram story of like, oh, I didn't know that, or that's really cool. Or like they would send me laughing emojis because they thought that the comedic side of it was funny. So once we started to see that, it was like, okay, let's start throwing some actual marketing behind it. So my background is in finance. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really know much marketing, but I had followed Gary Vee. So I just paid attention to a lot of his content, and then that led me to finding other marketers online and learning things from them of like hashtags, optimization of your LinkedIn or your Instagram like profile, links, etc., etc. So that's when we started to dabble in all of that stuff. And the main platforms at the beginning were Snapchat and Instagram, but then we started to focus mainly on Instagram, and now it's pretty much all LinkedIn because Instagram is incredibly hard to grow, especially an educational sort of media company.
And how long into that journey, into building the brand and everything, did you kind of make that transition to focusing on LinkedIn?
I would say that transition happened like 6 months ago. So it probably took us, I don't know, a year and a half or so, 2 years to really realize that Instagram wasn't a great platform to grow educational stuff because we just simply couldn't compete with the Grant Cardones of the world that would say, hey, we can help you get rich. Here's this Lamborghini. And we're like, no, you should go to school. Here are some tips for school, right? That's never going to win on your Instagram timeline. But on LinkedIn, that's something that does win because most of the people that are on LinkedIn are more professional and they've gone down a similar path as that. So that's why we started to focus a little bit more on there.
And what's the response been like on LinkedIn in this last 6 months? What have you seen? What kind of growth have you seen?
Yeah, so LinkedIn has gone absolutely bonkers. A little backstory on LinkedIn, like why I got started on it was I was still a student at school and I didn't think that anything would happen with GetChoGrindUp. Again, it was just a joke and like turning it a little bit serious, but still taking it as a joke for the most part. And started to post on LinkedIn and started gaining a crap ton of momentum. And so now, since I've been consistently posting on the platform, I receive about like 200,000 views every single month.
Wow. So, that's amazing, man. Yo, congratulations on that, bro. Like, hey, man, hats off to you. That's work.
Thank you. Yeah, like it's actually crazy. Like I would have never thought that that's a thing. But like people see that huge number of like 200,000 views and they think, oh, that's crazy. I'm like, yeah, but that's not generating any money. So we need to find a way to generate some money, as many content creators realize once they start getting views. Unless it's on YouTube, you're not getting paid for it, right?
Right.
So
but I mean, but just to go into that for a second, because I am a YouTuber, even just to go into that, most YouTubers will tell you that the majority of the money they generate is not from YouTube views. Like that's part of it, but usually it ends up, if they've built their business properly, or if they've put thought into the business aspects of it, the actual money that you get from AdSense, that you get from the views, is usually a very small component of their income. Most of them have like courses or info products or digital products that, and that's where the money comes from. They use that audience to fuel sales of these things that people can take away and use.
Exactly. That YouTube channel, like the views, so to say, are usually top of funnel, for the most part, right? For marketing terms,
right? You're building. It's the same thing that you're doing on. Let me move that out the way. It's the same thing that you're doing on LinkedIn. Basically, is you're building authority, you're building your brand, and gaining the trust of the people who are watching your content, and then you pivot from that into saying after you've built that trust, you've built that relationship with them, to saying, hey, by the way, we got these cool things. Maybe you can use them, and people say, oh, I like you, I'm gonna buy that cool thing, and then money starts coming.
Exactly. So that's how that's essentially how the LinkedIn consulting kind of got started, right? Is because people used to reach out to me and ask me to do their profiles, and when I was a student, that was all good and fun and doing stuff for free. But as I started to get towards like that graduation, I was like, well, I can't be doing this for free anymore.
Right, your time's valuable.
Exactly, right. So I had a job offer with one of the big four to do consulting, which I ultimately turned down to really go full time. Yeah, it was a crazy decision. Mom really wasn't too crazy about that.
I can imagine.
But it was something that I really felt passionate about. So that's what led me to LinkedIn consulting. And most of my clients with LinkedIn at the beginning were people that have been paying attention to my stuff, and they're like, your name is constantly popping up on my timeline. How can I do that for myself, essentially, or for my business? So I started to teach them that and started doing that. And it's been absolutely crazy to see what my life has been, because I would have never thought.
So, and I'm sorry to talk over you. I didn't mean to do that. And for that LinkedIn consulting, I'm kind of asking for myself. Do you have like a specific program that you walk them through, or do you kind of like customize it for each person? Like, how is that working for you?
Yeah, so I partnered up with my friend Stan Miller to create our LinkedIn course. So that's sort of like the lowest barrier of entry right there. That's $79. And then what we've done is, if you want more one-on-one consulting, I've got a plan. The basic plan is mainly just me going through your LinkedIn profile, giving you the tips and tricks of what I would do with your profile in terms of like what I would edit, what I would add, what I would subtract, and giving you some pointers in terms of like your profile picture, etc. But I don't necessarily do anything to your profile. It's just
Right.
sort of like a tips list, so to say. And then if you want me to go into your profile and actually make the changes and have a sit down meeting, a one-on-one meeting for like 1 or 2 hours or so, I get to really understand your story, and then I can craft up a summary, etc. That's another charge. And then the last sort of package that I have is everything under there, as well as I help you with the content creation side. So like providing you with a 30-day content calendar and helping you sort of figure out how you can tell your story and how you can lead that into generating sales, whatever it may be.
Nice. And man, that's a lot that we just covered. So
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
mean
no.
that's really cool, man. Like, and I'm so happy to hear your story and to hear like the steps and the strides that you've been making. So with Get Your Grind Up, where on that path that you see, where the journey that you want to take that on, how far would you say that you have come since the beginning, and where do you see it going like in the next year or 2 years?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that question because on our original podcast, the Get Your Grind Up podcast, we had this whole brand oriented thing around a loading bar. And we would always ask our guests, where do you feel like you are in your loading bar right now? Right. And when we would ask ourselves this question, we would always say, I think we're still at 1%. And if you look at us, right, you see the amount of views that we're getting, the content, etc. You might think that we're further down the path, but if you're looking at the back end of things, we're still trying to figure out the Gen Z market, so to say, in terms of how to monetize them correctly. Because with students and helping students out, it's a really tough market of your students don't necessarily have the most disposable income, right? Universities don't really have disposable income either. They're broke as well. And then companies really only have the amount of income to pay you for something, like in terms of like a recruiting fee of some sorts. But to have the companies pay that fee, you need an audience of students. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg game, and you've got 3 different variables that you have to sort of cater to. So we're still working on the correct business model for that, so to say, for the future. We've tested a few in the past, but nothing really has seemed to work greatly just yet. So that's why we're really focused on building up that student audience, so that we know once we find that correct business model for it, we can put all of our effort into it because we already have the student audience there.
Okay. Well, that's commendable. I mean, everything that you're doing sounds like you're checking all the boxes, and what I want people to understand is that even though you're saying that you haven't found the magic formula yet, you're out there, you're testing, you're doing different things, you're experimenting. Because a lot of business, I think one of the misconceptions that some people have is that when folks start a business, that they always walk in with the plan fully formed, fully fleshed out. A lot of people stumble into businesses by accident. Like you said, you started creating this content kind of as a joke, but then the attention made it serious. Mm-hmm. The fact that you were able to attract this audience, you were wise enough to say, oh, okay, this is valuable. What I'm doing means something to somebody other than me. And if it's got meaning to it and it's valuable to people, then there's got to be a way for us to figure out to create a business off of this.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because we thought that we had the business plan down like several times. We're like, okay, we figured it out. This is going to work. And then we try to implement it and it doesn't work. So one of the ones that we've trial and errored with essentially is the event space. We were looking to essentially create a new age of career fairs. And we started to do that, and then coronavirus hits. So we haven't really been able to execute on that.
Yeah.
Our second one was actually supposed to be yesterday.
Oh,
but again,
man.
we couldn't go through with it. But the problem that we're having with that is, again, the company side, they're willing to pay for that fee to attend the event, but they want to see a certain amount of students that are signed up. But it's kind of vice versa, because students won't sign up unless they see some
chicken and
company
egg.
that they exactly. So that's why right now, over these next sort of 3 to 6 months, however long this coronavirus things really happens, and hopefully it's shorter than longer, we're really focused on building up more brand equity in front of people's eyes for all of this.
Awesome, man. And man, this is such a good thing. Like, cause I like really seeing that you're a work in progress and that things are still going on and things are still building for you. But that you have, even though you kind of got knocked for a loop with the whole coronavirus thing, your events being canceled, and I'm right there with you. We talked a little bit before the podcast started. A lot of my work is in that event space, working with corporations, Fortune 500 companies, and the production, subcontracting with the production companies that help them put on their events. And all my work for that is gone. It's just gone.
Yeah, man.
I mean,
It's crazy.
I've got maybe one or two things that are supposed to be later in the year that are still on the calendar, but I'm not counting on those. And so everybody who's connected to events and anything like that is, I mean, even with content creation, like I have friends who work for like international production companies and they're scrambling right now because, like one guy I know up in DC, his company, most of their clientele or a large chunk of their clientele is medical.
Wow.
So they've got no time to do anything right now. And even then they've tried to pitch him, oh, well, we could produce coronavirus updates for you and put out content pertaining directly to this situation. And they're like, yo, we can't spare nobody to even talk to you for 5 minutes. Come back when this is over. So it's crazy, the ripple effects and the waves that are being felt right now. I mean, I'm hearing stories every day about people being let go from their jobs and opportunities drying up. And it goes at all levels. It's not even just, people like us who are consultants and specialty people. It's general stuff like waiters and I don't know, anywhere that there's people that need service. Like it's crazy, man.
Yeah, no, I'm really interested to see how it affects Orlando and like Florida in general, because our whole market is really built on older people coming down to retire, right? And then also tourism. The hospitality and tourism space. And those are the two industries that are getting hit the most. And we also have a really young demographic in Florida as well. And those are the ones that are spreading the disease as for the majority as well. So it's kind of like, I mean, it's Florida. So Florida's always like
Florida's always in the news for the wrong reasons.
Right. So it's going to be really crazy to see what ends up happening to Florida in general once this thing sort of subsides.
Yeah. I mean, I know that the economy of Florida has already taken a huge hit because I mean, like I said, I work in that corporate event space, and when there's not a pandemic, you can throw a rock down on iDrive and you're going to hit an event. You know what I'm saying?
Easily,
like every hotel has something going on. The convention center always has something going on. Disney always has a bajillion things going on because they've got all those hotels on their property and everything. And all that stuff's gone. All of it. And I mean,
it's just closed too.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's not even like it's a slow season. It's closed.
Right. Like no money. And one thing, like I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen to the airline industry.
Yeah,
because
they're part of the bailout that just got signed through, so they're getting
right.
some money
But
for that.
even with the bailout, like that's only gonna work for so long.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And there's always a price to pay for those bailouts.
Of course.
And I mean, even with, I don't really want to get into politics because I have very strong opinions, which might lose me audience. What little audience I have, but yeah, so let's not go there. But I mean, there's always a price to pay. Nothing's free. There's always consequences, even if it's done with the best intentions. So it's going to be interesting to see how people have to rethink their business models, what kind of pivoting gets done. Because, like, I know people who have been on flights recently and they're like, it's empty and everybody's sitting in first class because there's not even enough people to fill up. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy. So, and the airlines got to operate because we even those limited amount of travelers still needs to happen. But you got to think the amount of money they're losing on fuel, on pay for pilots, and like all the supplies and things that they cleaning crews just to come in and do these updated measures to wipe down the planes and things like that, making sure they've got the most up-to-date filters and things like so they're bleeding. There's so many industries that are just bleeding right now, and like my heart goes out to them. I mean, I'm bleeding right now, but they're on a massive scale.
Yeah, man. Like I've said many times, it's a crazy time to be alive right now. But I think in the end, there's going to be some good that kind of comes out of this, and that's why I'm really looking forward. Not necessarily looking forward, but it's going to be interesting to see what higher education looks like after this, because of
Mm,
the fact that everything has kind of gone online. Right? There's
right.
some people have been able to transition pretty well, like the tech savvy professors have, but maybe that opens up the door of, if I can do this from home, why do I necessarily need the university behind me, right? If I
Right.
can teach 1,000 students rather than 200, then I'd rather teach 1,000 and charge them on my own, and I can make my own money.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. Like I was I don't know. Maybe I'm old enough that I'm still kind of stuck in a traditional mindset where I'm thinking, "Oh, well they're just offering more classes online now or more programs online now." I never thought about professors up and leaving and saying, "Hey, let me just start my own thing online." And
Well,
I
because
mean,
the thing with higher ed, right, is I didn't know this until I started doing research. Is there's like levels to professors, right? You've got your higher the what most people think of a professor. Those are the tenured professors, right? And
right.
they're there for research purposes, and they probably won't leave the university. But on the lower tier in quotes
Right.
professors, you've got like the adjunct professors who are, and the associate professors, I believe, and they're just there to teach, and they don't get paid for the research side. They get paid to teach, and they don't necessarily get the greatest salary either. So imagine if you're a professor and this sort of opens your eyes to online learning and essentially building out your own Khan Academy, right, on Coursera or Udemy, whatever it may be.
Right.
Like that might be like, well, instead of teaching 50 students in a classroom and I make what, like $80,000 a year, what if I taught 1,000 students and made them all pay $200 for the class? Now I've got $200,000
Mm.
and I'm working way less time, right? So it might be able to it might open up some doors there, and if that does happen and you start to see those professors start jumping ship, that might be having like a real interesting time for higher educational
I
institutions.
hope a ton of educators just heard what you said, because I mean that could start a revolution right there. If that starts to happen, dude, that alone could shake up this country so
Hmm.
much. Because I mean, and not just having a ramifications on the education industry, because it is an industry, it is a business where that might force college tuition to go lower, but also then you've got to look back on the ramifications of like the banking and loans, because college loans are a big chunk of banking. There's
Hmm.
so I mean, how many people in this country got student loan debt?
Yeah,
And
it's like
how
two
much
point
money is
something
tied up
trillion.
in student loan debt? And if what you're saying is true and people start going to that self-education route, finding independent instructors, just learning the things that they absolutely need, just the skills that are critical to the career paths that they want to be on, instead of having to wade through all the fluff that is involved in a university education, man, if that became the new thing, if that became the new normal, I, dude, universities have
Yeah.
already kind of been, hurt in the past few years. That could spell a grave day for many people.
Yeah, the only thing that's stopping them, I would say, is the what's the best word of it? The like classification or the confirmation of someone having a degree. So that's the only reason, right? It's you can develop all the skills in the world, but if that job description requires you to have a bachelor's degree or requires you to have a master's degree, there's
Or
no
a
way that you're
doctorate.
getting, yeah, a doctor, right? There's no way that you're getting past the applicant tracking system. So
Right.
if someone comes up with a way, maybe it's me one day, I'm not sure, but to better classify something other than a degree, that's going to be what really game changes the higher ed institutions, because that's what's holding it together essentially.
Right. Still needing a degree as the price of entry to certain career paths. Yeah. And
Just how do you validate it on a resume, right?
right. Yeah, because if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a physicist, or all these certain things, like, and I mean, yeah, and if we want to dive into that, like, um, I kind of feel two ways about higher education. I feel like it has a purpose. I think it can be valuable, but I think it's only valuable if you walk into it with a plan.
Hmm.
And so because you're going to the university for this specific thing, and you need this specific thing to be your pass, your unlock, your key to that career. But one of the problems with that is like a lot of people go to college without the plan. They don't know what they want to do, or they're into college to find themselves, or because their parents said to go. And for me, that's like, yo, bro, save your money and stay at home. Like,
yeah, you need to spend $150K to find yourself.
Get a job, take a course online, watch YouTube and learn a skill that you can monetize. Like I got a daughter, I got a 4 and a son. I got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I've talked with my wife, and I'm like, yo, I'm not paying for college for them unless they have a plan. Like if they got a plan that requires college, I'm all for it. But unless they got a plan, I'm not doing it. They can pay for it on their own if they want, but unless they're like, yeah, Dad, this is my path that I want to take. It requires this degree, and this is why. I'm good with that. But if they don't have that, they got to figure it out on their own.
No, 100% agree. I think when your generation's kids start to grow up to that level, and I feel like a lot of people have that same mindset as you in terms of in your generation. And then when my generation as well starts to have kids, and they start to get into that college age, that's when the disruption's really going to sort of take place. But on top of that, sort of my view on higher education is there's just a disconnect between the students, the employers, and the universities, right?
Right.
The university, which is sort of the cornerstone of this whole equation, they think that their job is just to educate. And I think they do a pretty decent job at education. But what they lack is what the students and the employers actually want. The students just want the education, so to say, because that's the next step to getting a job. But the university doesn't help them get that job. And then from the employer standpoint, they just want employable students for their specific company, right? But because a university has to teach at a mass to educate in masses, they can't specifically teach like Tableau because Tableau is specific to GM, or specifically Microsoft Excel because they need to know that. You know what I mean? So I think that's why university succeeds at what university wants to do, but what they want to do isn't necessarily aligned with where their customers want from it. And that's the interesting thing.
Yeah, I think not just universities, but a whole ton of industries they're stuck in tradition, and they've made changes. They're slowly moving towards the modern age. Like there's more universities now that are offering online courses and things like that. But I mean, that's not really enough, is it? Like, because the world is changing. Like, the career path that you're on, the career path that I'm on. Like I do video production, but I didn't learn video production at school. I actually went to school for audio. I learned everything I know about filmmaking online for free. Well, maybe not everything. I paid for a few things here or there, but the majority of it was for
a lot
free.
Cheaper than an education,
right?
From like a
way cheaper
from like a Full Sail, right? You're dropping like
I did go to Full Sail, and but I mean, even now, Full Sail is, if you want to do the full program that I did, because they expanded it after I left, it's twice as expensive as it was when I went.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally twice as expensive. And I don't devalue that or say that it's not worth it, because I feel like I got my money's worth out of Full Sail. A lot of people may disagree. And if you're not familiar with Full Sail and you're listening to this, go look it up. It's a media school in Orlando, which has got a lot of really great programs. They're a full-fledged university now, not just audio, but they also do game design, film, entertainment business, music production. They got their fingers in so many pies right now, because they've really expanded their set of programs over the last few years. But yeah, I feel like I got my money's worth. Some people have mad stories to tell about Full Sail, but I think those people walked into it without their plan and without really knowing what was a good reason to go there, because I think people got it confused. They thought like Full Sail was a vocational school that's going to hook them up with a job on the way out, but no, they're a university, they're a educational institution, and none of those promise you a job when you get out.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like it's so interesting to see where higher ed's kind of going, and it's been interesting to see because I never would have thought that this content would resonate on LinkedIn, especially, right? Because it's who is going to listen to a 22-year-old at the time, now 23, talk about higher education and like the job search journey, etc.
Well,
But what I've
it's
yeah, go
interesting that
ahead.
you say that though, because now what I've it's, I wouldn't call it a full fledged trend, but I'm seeing more of it. Is that the people getting on LinkedIn are getting younger and younger. I
Hmm.
got a connection request from a high school student a few months ago, and that blew my mind. The fact that a high school student is forward thinking enough to be on LinkedIn trying to get their profile, they're not even in college yet. I think that college students with LinkedIn profiles that are like done up well are ahead of the curve. This kid was in high school, and it's like, dang, you already on it, homie. Like, you gonna do something.
Yeah, it's like, what was I doing in high school, right? Why didn't I have a LinkedIn in high school or whatever it is? But I totally agree. The demographic on LinkedIn is getting younger and younger, and I think the reason for that is because they're favoring content so highly on their platform, and it's all part of their plan, which I think they're executing pretty good on. They've learned from the Facebooks and the Instagrams of the world of when and how they were able to build up a younger audience, and I think they're building. That's what they're trying to do with LinkedIn because they understand that eventually those students are going to end up in professional careers, and hopefully they'll purchase like premium or recruiter or whatever it is from LinkedIn. So that's probably their whole funnel that way.
I can see that. That totally makes sense to me. But speaking of LinkedIn, let's dig into that a little bit. Where do you see the platform going over the next however many months, however many years? Like, I'm hearing rumors that they're going to start doing stories soon. Like, what do you see? Like, you're in the battlefield, you're there every day, you're coaching people, you're helping people build their businesses, build their brands on LinkedIn. Like, what do you see happening? Like, what are the trends that you see on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I think they're trying to build it into more of a social media rather than like the resume platform that they were really known for, like a job search platform. And I think so far they've done a pretty decent job of it with, I think they released video 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago.
Something
And
like that.
then, yeah, and then live hasn't officially rolled out just yet, but a lot of people have live
Yeah, but you
right
gotta like
now.
apply for it.
Yeah, yeah, you have to get into like their beta, which isn't really a beta because so many people have it now. It's just really if you take the time and effort to apply to it, it seems now. But in terms of your comment about stories, I do know that they were testing it last year, like 2 years ago, because they asked me if I wanted to beta test it
Huh.
at UCF, and it seemed that they were gearing it more towards universities because that was probably like the centralized location that they could test it out, so to say. So
Okay.
like UCF would have stories, and then University of Texas would have like their stories, or Stanford, whatever it may be. That's what it seemed like they were testing it out for. I haven't heard much from it, so they might have shelved it since then. But I do know that that was something that they were testing out at some point. In terms of what I think that the future of LinkedIn sort of becomes, I think the only way that they keep the content creators on the platform is if they find a way to help the content creators monetize. And what I mean by that is what you're seeing with Instagram and Twitter is people move after they built up a large following. The main goal is to build up a large following on a platform, whatever the hot one is, and then transfer to YouTube, because YouTube is the only one that allows you to monetize from your personal views, right? Yes, with Instagram, there's now that culture of like sponsored posts and such, but there really isn't a way for you to monetize specifically on just people who want to view your stuff like
Right.
organically. And YouTube is the only platform that's been able to figure that out. Facebook tried to do it, but the problem with Facebook is they created a culture of where if you're scrolling through your news feed, right, and there's a pre-roll ad, you're just going to scroll to the next thing. Whereas with YouTube, you're more immersed in that video. So even if there's a pre-roll ad,
You're gonna
you're
sit
more,
through it.
yeah, exactly. You'll sit through that 5 or 10 seconds, right? Just because.
Right. And
But
wait
with
till you can
Facebook,
skip it.
exactly like Facebook or Instagram, if they put a pre-roll ad in front of a video, you're like, I'll just go to the next one because it's so easy to swipe up and
Right.
down on there. So it'll be interesting to see where LinkedIn sort of goes because they make their money off of companies. Like all of their money really comes from B2B play, but they're only really prioritizing personal pages. So I'm interested to see how that really works in the future, because if you look at an engagement on like my profile, right, I'll get anywhere between probably like a 2 to 5% engagement rate on my post, and that leads to 200,000 views at the end of the month. Whereas if you look at Disney, and you look at one of their posts that they put out, they've got like 3 million followers, and they'll put out a post and they'll get like 300 likes, and you're like, what the heck is going on there?
Well,
Like
I
that.
think, and this is my personal opinion, and you might know more about the platform than me. But talking with one of the coaches that I work with, this lady named Lorena Acosta, you might have heard of her. She's pretty big on LinkedIn, and I help her produce content. And she's like, I don't get paid for engagement. I get paid for views. And not saying that she gets paid directly for views, but what she's saying is that the audience size that's seeing the content is what gives her authority and enables her to monetize on that. Because she told me, she's like, she told me straight up, she's like, the people who are actually engaging with my posts, the ones who are liking, the ones who are commenting, those aren't my customers. She's like, 90% of the people who actually take the time to comment on my posts, they're never going to buy a program from me. It's the people who are watching and watching and watching for long periods of time to see what I'm really about. Those are the ones that message me. Those are the ones that become my customers. Those are the ones that I consult for. It's not the ones who actually engage.
No, yeah, I 100% agree there. But the thing with that, right, is because I know I've seen Lorena's content, right, and she gets hundreds of thousands of views on some of her stuff there. If she got that viewage on YouTube, on top of the consulting that she's able to do, she also gets a cut from Google's ad revenue, and that's what I mean. That's why a lot of these influencers try to make that jump to YouTube. Only a few are successful because it is a different platform. But if you look at almost every influencer's trajectory, so to say, is build up an influence on one platform and find a way to move it to YouTube. So that's why when I think, if you look at how Instagram is going now, right, engagement is really low because they've needed to find a way to monetize. And the way that they've looked to monetize is by adding more ads to their newsfeed. And because they add more ads, less people want to spend time on the platform.
Right.
Whereas YouTube, the same amount of ads has really been the same. Like the content creator gets to choose how many ads they want to add. So then it's on the content creator to actually choose how many ads they want to add per video. So I think YouTube actually has the best monetization scheme in terms of how they pay out their influencers, as well as how the influencers pay out YouTube, so to say. Whereas Instagram, Facebook, etc., you're seeing, like, yes, their numbers are growing on the outside, but if you're asking the bigger, like the marketing people who usually drive numbers to these platforms where their attention is going, it's starting to move away from Facebook and Instagram right now to more like a TikTok or a LinkedIn.
Right. And I definitely hear what you're saying on from organic traffic standpoint. I definitely agree with everything you just said. Because I'm always telling people, like, yo, you need to be on LinkedIn. You need to be looking at TikTok because you may not have it figured out right now. But if you're there while it's still young, because there's a ton of people watching TikTok, but not enough people creating content on TikTok. So the opportunity is still super duper high. And I mean, and while I say that, there are people making millions of dollars on TikTok. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it. I'm hearing stories about agencies for influencers and all that. Like, it's already there. So people who think that it's not fully formed. The platform is not fully formed. It's not fully fleshed out. From what I'm hearing, they're still figuring out their live thing and the way to monetize from that. Or like the live streams are the only way for creators to directly monetize because people can make donations and things like that. But there's people making legit money or getting legit opportunities. Like, that girl who got the Renegade dance and she did the thing with the NBA. And I mean, that's crazy in and of itself. Like, what is she, like 15? And she's out there teaching, and she's out there teaching an NBA cheerleading squad dances because they saw her on TikTok. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
That, like, 10 years ago, that would not have happened. 20 years ago, definitely not happening. 30 years ago, that wouldn't even have been an imagining. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's amazing the time that we're in and the opportunities that are right in front of us.
Yeah, 100%. Like, TikTok is such an interesting platform for me because you really actually get to see a company take advantage of social media, of other social medias, because most of the other social medias, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc., they don't like it when you bring when you try to take people off of their platform.
Right.
Whereas TikTok, they kind of promote it. right? It's so easy to share something on Twitter. It's so easy to share something on Snapchat. It's just a click of a button
And
and it
people
brings
are
you
even
directly
sharing
to
the
the ad.
TikTok stuff on LinkedIn. I'm seeing a
Exactly.
ton of people on LinkedIn sharing their TikToks.
Exactly. But like for instance, with the LinkedIn algorithm, I know that if you link something on your post, it dramatically decreases your chances of like getting boosted by the algorithm on LinkedIn.
Right.
And that's because they don't want to like they don't want you to take people off of their platform.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with TikTok, they're like, oh, you want to share this somewhere? More than happy to do it, and we will boost up your algorithm if you do it. Yada yada yada. We just have to add a little like watermark on there so they
Right.
know that it's coming from TikTok, and we'll
And
actually
I
add
think that's
your username.
genius. And,
Oh
and I
yeah.
mean, I think the watermark thing, that's genius, because like you immediately, what might just look like a cell phone clip on a platform, you know that came from TikTok.
Yep. Exactly. And that's the beauty of it, right? And I think it's been super interesting to see and watch that grow. And I think it's really unique how they've sort of brought the Twitch and esports gaming of monetization of like donations and bits, etc., to the regular content creation world of how they're trying to monetize their creators' lives and such. So I don't know. We'll see where it kind of goes in the future.
Yeah, and I mean monetization on LinkedIn. Like I'm kind of on two minds of the subject. Like I see what you're saying, that to keep the dedicated creators on there, that they might need to figure out some sort of platform. But I also think the beauty of LinkedIn, and I think the reason why content creation has been growing on LinkedIn and is because of the purity of it, the fact that there is no monetization option, and that the only monetization that happens kind of is a byproduct of you just doing your thing and building that audience. It keeps it kind of pure, because on these other platforms, when that stuff is introduced, then you kind of there's always this problem of creators starting to create purely for the monetization, like
Agreed.
trying to hop on whatever wave, whatever trend is working, quote unquote working at the moment, just to get the views, so that they know that there will be more money flowing in. And I think why content creators on LinkedIn works so well is because everybody knows when they're creating that content, yes, there may be a business at the end of the road that's going to benefit from that, creating that content, but they know that the content that's right in front of them, there's hardly any agenda that's able to be there, because the content where people are explicitly saying, at least the majority of it that I see, where people are explicitly saying, hey, use my service, do this for me, that stuff gets ignored. But the content that's being created, where it's just valuable, actionable intel that people are handing out, that's what people gravitate to. Or just general positive vibes. People want to feel good. People want to know that you're the type of person that feels good. They want some more positivity in their lives. With all the negativity that's going on in the world, everybody can use a little bit of sunshine, you know what I'm saying? And I see
100%.
that content, the ones that's encouraging, uplifting, promoting the best in all of us, that's the stuff that's resonating. And I think the problem might be that if there starts to be monetization of that content, that people will start feeling, or start asking themselves, is this genuine? Is this real? Like, are people just telling me to have a good day, or to giving me this advice because it's going to put money in their pockets?
Hmm.
And maybe there are people that are already doing it because it's going to put money in their pockets, but it's not directly going to put money in their pockets. It's just, it's like we're saying, you build your audience, you build your following, you gain their trust, and then they want to do business with you. And so it's a much more organic process than monetization by views and ads and yada yada yada. And my fear is that, because I'm loving the content platform that LinkedIn has become, my fear is that if they do add monetization to the mix, that's going to die.
Yeah, I can see your point with that, and I think I understand that from that perspective of the authenticity of the content that could be created on the platform if you add monetization to it. But I mean, if you look at Instagram, right, there's people that do the same exact thing. And I think it kind of comes with, as any platform gets sort of bigger and more attention. I think the bigger upside, though, with the monetization of content creators is you actually get better content creators onto the platform. And by that,
I'll
what
agree
I
with that.
mean, yeah. So by that, what I mean is, like, if you look at the level of content on YouTube, it is probably unmatched to any other platform right now in terms of content creation.
Oh yeah.
And if you look at in terms of the numbers that some of these kids are pulling, and I say kids because if you look at how much money David Dobrik is making, it's actually insane. I think he said that he went, and because he's having problems with monetization right now, and the whole thing that YouTube is sort of changing, I think he said that he went from making $250,000 a month
Jesus.
to like $30,000. Now imagine the incentive that that gives a good content creator if they see, holy crap, David Dobrik was making that amount of money a month on YouTube just creating videos, and you're getting like, let's just say you're getting like 200,000 views on your stuff on LinkedIn, but you're not getting any money.
Right.
You're probably going to be like, well, why don't I try to create content on YouTube? And that's why, again, I think everyone always ends up going to YouTube because they're like, I can actually see the monetization, at least short term, when I need to survive, that would help me out.
Yeah, and like I love YouTube, but I'll just be straight up. Most business owners, most entrepreneurs don't belong on YouTube.
I agree.
Because they don't take the time to learn the platform, and they end up just using it as, oh, this is a place to have my videos. Mm-hmm. And that's fine if that's all you want to use it for, but realize you're not going to make any money if you go into it with that attitude that, oh, I'm going to just throw up these videos, I'm going to get the same amount of views that I got over here, and then I'm gonna make some money because YouTube lets you monetize. It's like, no, brother, it doesn't quite work that way. There's a whole different psychology. You gotta kind of engineer your content to be found, and because it's much harder to be found on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I've actually just started up a YouTube coaching side to my business, or consulting. I wouldn't call it coaching yet, but more like consulting side to my business endeavors, because I've been there for the last 2 years. I've built a modestly sized channel. I'm about almost 2,500 subscribers. And awesome. I know how to grow it. I know I would have more if I had more time to put into it. Like, I see the proof in front of me every day, because every time I put up a video and it's the right kind of video, I see my numbers go crazy, or not crazy. I don't have that many views, but I know what kind of content works for my channel, and that's another thing. Like, people got to figure out what kind of content works for their subject matter and their channel, and it's a whole different beast, man. It's like battle, LinkedIn is kind of in a good spot where you can kind of throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, and you might just throw up stuff that randomly that just works or takes off, and you have no idea why. And so it's a really good place to experiment. But I think it'd be people trying to go from LinkedIn to YouTube, which is a much more systematic and established platform. I think it's going to shake up some people's world when they try to make that transition. Now, if you're about your business and you're willing to learn and do your homework, yeah, you can definitely make that transition and make that money or whatever you want to do. You can make it happen on YouTube, but it takes a lot of work and dedication.
Oh, like 100%. If you're trying to just grow and test things out, I don't think there's a better platform right now other than LinkedIn and TikTok, right? Just because it's much easier to see what will pop because of how the algorithms work right now. Mm-hmm. And you can learn a lot from just engaging and seeing what people are putting out on each platform. Whereas with a YouTube or an Instagram, it's like you're battling the beast, right? You've got so much competition in terms of people creating on each platform. It's actually insane. Where with like LinkedIn, I think the stat is like only 1% create content on LinkedIn every single week or something. And of that 1%, only 1% create video content. So if you're creating video content, you're like a part of a few million people that do it. And yeah, right. A few million people might sound like a lot, but if you compare it to YouTube, I think it's like 300 hours of content are uploaded every single minute on YouTube. So it's like you've got a lot less competition on some of these other platforms.
And that's what I'm trying to tell people, man. I'm trying to get them hip to it. It's like, dude, you need to be over here. Get you some of this juice. Like, get it before it's gone. Like, I mean, Gary Vee says it all the time. He's like, yo, this is going to change. It's not going to be like this forever. The platforms are going to mature. And when they mature, the price is going to go up. The engagement is going to go down. And you're going to wish you were there 3 years ago.
Yep. 100%. And like you've said, LinkedIn, TikTok, that's kind of the two biggest platforms right now for organic growth. but it'll be interesting to see what sort of happens over the next couple of years. Because already even you're seeing LinkedIn engagement sort of going down a little bit as they're trying to figure out how to monetize everything. But we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and I mean I've noticed that trend myself, and like at first I thought I was imagining things, but then like I had a few bigger creators on there kind of echo my thoughts, and I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. I am actually seeing this trend of like views going down, but it seems like the engagement's going up, which is a nice balance. I mean, you know, you kind of want higher percentages of engagement, but you know, I mean, it is what it is. The algorithms always change. We're at the mercy. And so you just kind of need to ride it out and watch the trends, figure out what's happening, and then adjust accordingly.
Yeah, it's a great time to be alive for marketers, but it's also an interesting time because it's changing so fast. Algorithms change every single day, and you just have to find ways to keep up with it and just keep testing things.
All right, man. Well, Justin, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Like I said in the messages we sent back and forth, I kind of been keeping an eye on your content for a while because I haven't seen that many LinkedIn creators coming out of Orlando, and seeing what you've been doing with Get Your Grind Up. It really made me happy to see that. And, you know, all the best of luck to you. And before you get out of here, there's always a couple of questions that I like to ask people.
Of course.
In your journey, what would you say has been the biggest obstacle that you've had to overcome? And after that, what is the one piece of advice that you have gotten or wisdom that you've attained that, you know, has just stuck with you through all this time?
Yeah. So the first question, what I would say is the biggest thing that I've had to overcome, it was probably my mindset of being young. I'm usually almost always the youngest person in the room. And at the beginning I would be like, well, I'm like really scared. I don't really have expertise to me. Why am I even here? But overcoming that mindset of you actually belong here. You're here for a reason. They invited you for a reason, allowed me to ask questions and have the confidence to ask questions. And because I ask questions, people like older people and really successful people see themselves in me because they were once me when they were 22, 23, 24 years old. And they're more than happy to talk to me, interview me, have me interview them on my podcast, whatever it may be. So I think that's the biggest thing that I had to overcome, of realizing that you're there for a reason. If you find yourself in a room that you feel that you're underqualified for, you're there for a reason. Even if you snuck into it, you got there for a reason, and use it to your advantage.
Awesome.
To your second question is, what was like the biggest thing that, like, piece of advice, right?
Yeah.
Piece of advice. So the biggest thing the quote that I always remember is, you overestimate what you can do in 1 year and you underestimate what you can do in 10. And especially being young, people always tell me, be patient, be patient, be patient. But when you're young, you're like, I need that tomorrow. I need that tomorrow. I need that tomorrow. And that's where that quote really makes sense of, you overestimate what you can do in 1 year, because we always think we're going to build the next Uber in 6 months or the next Airbnb in 6 months, when you realize those companies started back in 08 and 09 to become what they are today. And
Right.
It's like, that's a decade. That's what can happen in a decade, right? $60 billion can happen in a decade. That doesn't happen in 1 year. You're not going to become Uber in 1 year. You're not going to become Gary Vee in 1 year. That takes time. So when you put that into perspective, it really helps you stay calm, A, but also B, takes a little bit of pressure off yourself, and it makes you a little bit happier too.
That was a good one. Of all the answers to that question that I've gotten, that has to be one of the best. And that really resonated with me, man. So once again, Justin, Get Your Grind Up, thank you for coming through the podcast. We really appreciate your time and your energy, and I really hope that people listen to this and get some value, because you really had some great things to say. So with that, we have come to the end of the 1,000 Miles podcast. They say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. When are you going to take yours?